I'm Dr. Jung Zhao, Dean of the College of Business at Governor State University. On behalf of my colleagues in the college and the planning team, thank you for joining us as we conclude this year's Business Week program with the closing keynote and COB Alumni Hall of Achievement induction. Many of you participated in our inaugural Business Week program last year. You probably remember we hosted our opening keynote by Dr. Rita McGrath of Columbia University in the Center for Performing Arts, had our career fair in the Hall of Governors, and also held our inaugural alumni induction and reception in the beautiful banquet hall of the Odyssey Country Club. This year, we couldn't do any of those in person because of the pandemic, which profoundly changed how we study, how we work, and how we basically conduct our everyday activities. But we are determined to provide the same rich, engaging, professional opportunities for our students, alumni, our faculty and staff, and our business partners. So with support of our internal and external partners and months of planning and preparation, we are able to offer this year's virtual business week that has something for everybody. So this evening, we are concluding the two-day program with a closing keynote by Mr. Howard Tullman, entrepreneur, venture capitalist, former CEO of 1871, the world's #1 technology incubator, and Ed Kaplan Family Institute for Innovation and Technology. He will be sharing his insights on disruptive innovation, entrepreneurship, and the future of work, followed by an interactive Q&A moderated by Ms. Zyme Banks. The second half of tonight's event will be COB Alumni Hall of Achievement. We will be presenting awards to 3 of our outstanding alumni, and they will also share their insights about career development, moderated by Lauren Healy, Corporate and Alumni Relations Officer at GSU. So now, without further ado, let me turn the stage to my colleague, Mr. William Davis, VP for Institutional Advancement, who is going to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Howard Tullman. Will?
Yeah, thank you, Dean Zhao. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for your participation and support, and we're in for a wonderful treat this evening. As June mentioned, we have Howard Tullman with us. As the Executive Director of the Ed Kaplan Family Institute for Innovation and Tech Entrepreneurship and the General Managing Partner for the Chicago High Tech Investment Partners, LLC, and for G2T3V, LLC, 2 early stage venture funds, as well as an active board member for the number of tech startups. Howard is highly sought after educator, author, venture investor, technology advisor, and business leader. He was most recently the CEO of 1871 in Chicago, an entrepreneurial hub for digital startups, which is ranked #1 in the world, as June mentioned. Previously, he was the chairman and CEO of Tribeca Flashpoint College, which he co-founded in 2007. And prior to that, he served as the president of Kendall College. And I just want to give Howard as much time as possible. I remember the days when you were at 1871, you had some awesome events and activities that were open to the public, as well as many of your speeches around Chicago. So I know we won't be disappointed this evening. So with that, thank you, Howard, and appreciate you accepting this invitation.
Thank you very much, Will. And I'm excited to be here. And I want to start by thanking you and saying that I'm going to speak tonight about 3 things that are near and dear to my heart: entrepreneurship, innovation, and how new technologies will continue to change the ways that we work and how we live. As you've heard, I've been an entrepreneur for more than 50 years. And today, entrepreneurs are rock stars, and everyone from athletes to artists thinks that at some point in their lives, they want to be one. But being an entrepreneur isn't exactly a profession. It's more like a genetic condition or a passionate disease, and it's definitely one that offers its victims very few options and little choice. People become entrepreneurs because, not that they want to, but because they have to, and because they couldn't keep a job working for other people if their lives depended on it. They're basically unemployable agents of change. And being an entrepreneur isn't easy. It's occasionally fun. It's always hard work. And if you're not careful, it can become overwhelming and take important time and energy away from your family and from other equally important obligations and responsibilities in your life. You learn pretty quickly when you work for yourself that there's always more work, but you've only got one family. And you need to be sure to make that a priority. And remember that notwithstanding what you see and read every day, entrepreneurship isn't a path for everyone. But today, in our frantic world, where the only constant is constant change, every one of us is going to need to be entrepreneurial in order to succeed, regardless of what our actual job description may be and whether we like it or not. This means a few things: setting our own course, dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity, taking responsibility for our actions, trying to make a difference in this world, and working to make a life not just for yourselves and your loved ones, but more of a life and less of a simple living. And as you enter the workforce, you won't be able to go out and simply find a job or fill a position. In many cases, and this is exciting, you'll have a chance to help create the different kinds of jobs, innovative solutions, and new opportunities that will define the digital and the global economy of the future. Your careers will be very different from ours, not a linear path or a single employer. You'll move as and when you decide, from job to job, gathering experiences, gaining additional skills, learning from good and bad role models, and ever expanding outward as you grow toward what makes your life most complete. Lifelong learning and constantly upgrading your skill set will be as big and important a part of your job as any particular tasks or other requirements. And throughout your career, you'll have to repeatedly invent and reinvent yourselves to meet the constantly changing demands of the marketplace. It won't be easy. It's a flat out and a worldwide race. And the competition won't be waiting for you or anyone else. In addition, you can forget about lifetime employment, working for one company or one business, because most of you, in fact, over 40% of the entire country will be working as freelancers, basically for yourself by the end of this decade. And that's good in the sense that your education at GSU, with its emphasis on excellence and continuous improvement and accountability, has provided you with the skills, the tools, and the work ethic that it's going to take to be successful in this new post-pandemic world. And believe me when I tell you that as fast as our world was changing before the virus, the truth is that the rate of change has actually sped up. And every new change today accelerates the next. In fact, the rate of change in your lives will never be slower than it is right now. The future isn't coming around the corner or tomorrow, it's here today. And by the way, the future isn't something that you wait and hope for. Hope is never a winning strategy. The future is something that you go out and grab hold of and make your own. So how should you go about making yourself a successful and productive part of this new world? I wish there was a simple answer or one that's universally applicable, but there's not. Each of you will need to find your own way. There's no roadmap, no guarantees, no guidebook, and no shortcuts or tricks of the trade to get you there. But there are a few basics that you'll need. And I call these the perspiration principles. They're pretty simple to state, but they're not easy to live by or to live up to. So there's 6. First, preparation. You'll need to prepare more than others think is smart or necessary. Effective performance is always preceded by painstaking preparation. And I like to say that you get what you work for, not what you wish for. The second is perspiration. You'll need to work harder and longer than others think is possible. And frankly, if you can't outsmart them, you can always outwork them. Good genes and big brains are nice to have, but ultimately effort trumps talent. Number three is perseverance. You need to stick to the task, however bumpy the road becomes. Never give up, never give in, no retreat, no surrender. Good things don't happen overnight. They're the product of an iterative process. Try, fail, advance a little bit, try, fail, pick yourself up, try again. The one thing we know for sure is that it's always too soon to quit. And just to be clear, this iterative process of successive approximation rather than postponed perfection or waiting for miracles is the very heart of innovation. People often confuse innovation and invention. Invention is tough, it's uncertain, it's difficult, and it's costly. Innovation is about developing a thoughtful, careful, and scientific process of constantly moving forward, learning from every false step and mistake, and getting a little better all the time. Number four is principles. You want to do what you're doing for something bigger than yourself. You want to make it matter and make a difference. You can't add value if you don't have values, and the best entrepreneurs will tell you that they never did it for the money. They did it for a greater good. And fifth is passion. You need to care more than others think is wise. Making dreams into realities today is painful and often thankless. But your passion and your commitment are what will set you apart from the pack. When I was the president of Kendall College, as you heard, which was primarily a culinary school, we said that recipes create meals and cooks, but it's passion that creates chefs. And it's the same rule for entrepreneurs as well. In the end, the one who cares the most wins. And now that you've mastered sort of these basic ideas, you need to take a hard look at what the path going forward is going to look like, what the main drivers of change are going to be, and where you can expect to end up. And frankly, if you don't care where you end up, then any road will take you there. But that's not the goal. When I look forward, I see 6 primary drivers or vectors of change that will radically alter every business in every industry over the next few years. Some of these drivers are technological and others are psychological, but they're all unavoidable. And they need to be part of your mental toolkit as you try to figure out how to succeed in the new world of work. In the digital world, the desires and expectations of consumers, whether they're clients, patients, customers, students, or whatever, are constantly changing. And they're always increasing, up and to the right. We live in a world today of what have you done for me lately, where the past is a given that's taken for granted, and the future is always about more. Yesterday's miracles are today's and tomorrow's so whats. To succeed, you've got to be able to identify and anticipate those emerging needs and demands and create products and services and solutions that meet and ideally exceed those demands. The bar keeps getting higher, and the companies that succeed in the future will be those that surprise and delight their customers. They're focused every day on these 6 drivers. And take note, the first driver is time. Time is the scarcest resource in our lives, and concerns about time will drive everything else. Businesses will increasingly compete in what I call the right now economy. And frankly, as you already know from your own lives, we all suffer from hurry sickness, where nobody really wants to wait for anything. We want to click it and get it. Businesses need to be there, anywhere and everywhere the buyer is, when the buyer is ready to buy. And think about this. Today, time is actually more valuable than money. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it does buy freedom. And we're happy to pay for access, for speed, and for convenience. So the first vector to understand is time. The second is voice. The default operating system for our homes, our workplaces, and our cars will be voice-driven. Already, more consumers use voice assistants in their car than smartphones. This year, more than 50% of all the internet searches in the United States will be by voice. And this in turn is leading to what we call a conversational economy, where the commerce will be about ease, voice, and efficiency. Voice commands are 4 times faster than text. And in the mobile and the voice world, we don't really want a list from Google of 400 answers. We don't want a long list or a bunch of choices. We want a single compelling answer, and we want it as soon as possible. This shift and this expectation will change advertising, shopping, telemedicine, and many other parts of our lives. And that's just the beginning. As the population ages, more and more older adults will also find voice interactions to be infinitely easier than using a mouse and a keyboard. Young people have already made this very critical shift to understanding that they aren't talking through their phones to another person, they're talking to the device itself. And whether it's Alexa or Siri or Bixby or Cortana, it's here to stay. And as an interesting aside, parents are already trying to address the new forms of etiquette with their young children who are quite adept at asking for songs from Spotify or bedtime stories from Alexa. And the question for these young mom and dads is whether to teach their children to say thank you to Alexa. And if they don't, when those kids get to school, they're going to be demanding little monsters, and that's not going to make anyone very happy. So etiquette is changing, the way we interact with machines is changing, and all of it is changing at a very rapid pace. The third driver is attention. Today, we say that attention is the new currency. Every day, amidst the noise and the clutter and the glut of online information, we make hundreds of choices as to how we spend our precious and very valuable attention. We make time for what we're interested in, but sadly today most people have the attention span of a flea. Whole new industries have already been built and will grow exponentially over the next few years to service this newest phase of the digital economy, which we call the attention experience economy. In the olden days, businesses created physical products and services. Some still do. In the 80s and the 90s came the advent of digital rather than physical products and the creation of financial instruments and exchanges. But today, some of the most valuable companies in the United States create and deliver audiences and eyeballs. Whatever else they may do, both Google and YouTube, Facebook and Instagram are basically in the business of assembling constantly growing audiences, which they package and sell to advertisers. And what they're really selling are tiny slices of our attention. Most of the services we think of as free because we don't pay for them are actually selling us. We're the product. Every business going forward will need to develop an attention strategy. Because if you want me to pay attention to you, your product, service, cause, candidate, etc., you've got to pay for my attention. But the good news, in a way, is that you won't pay for it with money. You'll pay for my attention by showing me that you can do one of 5 things, 5 very important things for me. Save me time, save me money, increase my productivity, help me make better choices and decisions, or change and improve my status. If you can show me that you can help me in one of those regards, or many, I'll pay attention. And there's one very important additional aspect of the attention equation that you need to appreciate and understand before you try to reach out to customers or clients or consumers. The context is more important today than the content. Let me repeat that. The context of communications is more important than the content. What does that mean, and why do so many advertisers, marketers, and alleged communication consultants and experts completely miss the boat? It means very simply that if I'm not listening to you, it doesn't really matter what you're trying to say to me. We call this smart reach. And what it means is that your job is to figure out how to get engaging, relevant, and customized content and messaging to me at the right time and the right place. Otherwise, it's a waste of my time and your money. Here's a simple fact. 82% of active online consumers haven't bought a single thing through social media. It's pretty simple. If I'm socializing, I'm not shopping. Social media today is about discovery, not purchase. And one other important observation, in 2019, for the first time, dollars spent on digital advertising exceeded the total ad spend on TV. If you're not where your customers are in your business, you're nowhere. And they're no longer watching traditional TV. The fourth driver is personalization and customization. In addition to wanting everything right now, we want it to be just right. What I want, when and where I want it, on my terms, at my price, in real time, on demand. The notion of on demand is especially critical because we're entering a world where consumers and customers don't want to make appointments, don't want to buy subscriptions or have long-term commitments. Businesses will have to figure out how to be all things to each person. And these are the competitive demands of the new digital marketplace. And as you'll see in a moment, they're only possible because of the availability of massive personalized data and ubiquitous connectivity. And as I said, the fifth driver is data. Data is the oil of the digital age. Even more importantly, data is what's driving us from a world of diagnostics, where we look backwards and try to figure out what just happened, to a new world of prognostics, where we're predicting and anticipating, and in truth, controlling and determining what's going to happen in many parts of our lives. If you think of the old world as a thermometer that measured temperature, the new world is based around thermostats that let us manage and change our environments, all based on massive stores of personal data. In hockey terms, we're skating today to where the puck is headed, not where it's been, and we're heading it off at the pass. Here as well, entirely new industries are being developed, which will use data to add engagement and value to the ways that data-driven businesses connect with their end users in virtually every field. Already we have companies that can tell us which advertisements work best, systems that are more effective than real estate brokers themselves in forecasting geographic market trends and movements, credit card companies that track suspect activity and preempt fraud and misbehaviors, and food pricing algorithms that change product prices in real times in stores across the country in order to move old products and eliminate waste. And the last driver is connectivity, constant and ubiquitous connectivity. Our phones aren't simply communication devices today. They're trackers, they're teachers, and they're tethers as well, and we're constantly connected. Over 85% of us look at our phones within 15 minutes of waking up every single day. And during the day, we'll look at them another 175 to 200 times. Everything is a conversation. And it's not simply our homes or our phones or our cars, it's all of those things that are increasingly connected along with all kinds of IoT devices in our homes. Without these constant connections, many of the other key drivers that I shared with you would lose a great deal of their impact. And many of the features and functions and services that we've come to expect now and take for granted, frankly, would largely disappear. One interesting example of how quickly texting has overtaken and virtually replaced email as a main form of communication for just about anyone under 30 is quite clear. The statistics are amazing. We open less than 25% of our emails, but we look at 98% of our texts. We respond to emails, if at all, within 90 minutes on average, but we reply to texts within 90 seconds. The reasons that texting is so effective are pretty obvious. Our devices are always there. They're generally always on. And frankly, texts are virtually impossible to ignore. We're suckers for that ring or bing or bong, and we can't resist. So those are the 6 vectors of the ways that the future will work. Every business coming out of the pandemic will need to adapt, to revise and reimagine every aspect of their products, their services, and their other offerings. Keeping these considerations in mind, this should be part of your mental toolkit, thinking always of concerns around time, convenience, speed, ease of access. And hopefully many of you will be part of making these important changes and shifts occur, because every one of us is going to be subject to these overwhelming changes in terms of new and exciting technologies. Now, we understand that the future is scary, it's uncertain, and exciting all at the same time. But together, we have a chance to do some remarkable things. We can keep inventing it, we can expand it, and we can make it better, because that's what entrepreneurs do. And they do that every single day. Now, we've set aside some time for questions and an opportunity to sort of exchange interactively information with you. So I have a partner in this adventure, and I'm going to ask Zion to come and join us and start with the questions. Zion, you need to unmute.
Yes, I'm a mean. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That was so exciting to listen to you talk about entrepreneurship, innovation, and new technologies, and the new currency of our time, of attention. I was very engaged. So A+ on your presentation.
Thank you.
So Howard, we are so excited to have you here with us at Governor State, even in a virtual environment. I mean, the golden nuggets that you're dropping are just, they're priceless. And so I just wanted to start off by quoting you from your book, You Can't Win the Race Without Your Mouth. And you talk about telling simple stories to sell your idea. I love that title. Give us a simple explanation of who you are.
Well, I think I'm a change agent. I love change. I love new challenges. And I'm an artist, because we try to build businesses that are places of wonder, that are exciting, that are stimulating, that are beneficial for all the participants. And so I would say that I'm a business artist.
Okay, so that's a far cry from what Cranes calls you in 2017. They said you were a Willy Wonka of the tech world.
Well, I love chocolate. There's no question. I love chocolate. But the truth is that that's not so bad. I mean, when I think back to building Kendall or Tribeca or Experientia or 1871, in all of those cases, it was about building an environment. It was really about what's the experience going to be of all the people who are there, who are going to be part of that with us. And we wanted it to be one of wonder, which is for sure, what Willy Wonka's world is all about, but also of collisions where a bunch of excited people would learn from each other and could share, and serendipity, because you never know. I always say you never know who's going to bring you your future. And so you have to be open to all kinds of new experiences and different people and different opportunities. And those were the kinds of environments that we tried to put together. So it didn't have as much in the way of chocolate and flowing rivers and things as Willy Wonka's world, but we think it was exciting nonetheless.
Okay, so I wanted to talk with you a little bit about being a disruptor. I first heard this term right around the time Steve Jobs died. And I was reading about how he just totally disrupted 7 industries, like how we consume news, how we use computers, how we watch television and listen to music, how we read books, photography, and then of course, how we talk on the phone. So can you tell us what industries or what types of industries you're disrupting?
Sure. Well, first of all, the most astonishing thing about Steve, and I knew Steve, and he was a friend for a number of years, is that the number of industries he's disrupting has not stopped. I mean, because to your list of 7, you could add fitness. I mean, because the watch,
True.
and
Right.
you could add healthcare and medicine. Honestly, education. If you talk to most educators, they're using iPads all
Especially
the
today.
time. Yeah, and so
Mhm.
so he never stopped, and that technology is so robust that it's going to continue to disrupt. We focus principally on data-driven industries, so
Mhm.
insurance, automotive, marketing, e-commerce, certainly. Cybersecurity is a new one that's emerging that's very,
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
significant.
Mhm.
And education. A number of our
Okay.
companies as well are focused on education.
Okay. And what did you say about data is the
Data, yeah, data is the oil of the digital age.
so you've discovered oil.
Yeah,
Love it.
data is.
Okay.
I listen. There aren't any businesses, and this goes back to Peter Drucker, who said that if you can't measure what you're doing, it's meaningless, and
Right.
it's all about data.
Right.
And so everything we do, we try to build around a strategy of information, shared information, but measured information, and use it in ways that can be not simply analytical, but predictive as well.
Mhm. So you talked a lot in your presentation about drivers.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to ask you here for just a little more insight on your personal drivers, your drive to innovate, like where does that come from, as well as your drive to invest?
Well, the drive to innovate, and this is so part and parcel of what the whole philosophy of GSU really is, which is iteration. I mean, I
Absolutely.
mean, everybody understands that you don't get better without bumbling and fumbling and falling and
Mhm.
trying and keeping to try and building off of everything. So um, I think that I call this successive approximation, which means getting a little closer every time you try to the goal and then moving the goalpost
Mhm.
instead of waiting until something is perfect. Because if you wait, you're never going to be on time. So iteration is a very, very critical part of our strategy. The auto industry in this country was bested by the Japanese for many years because of that idea of
Mhm. Mhm.
constant change and constant improvement. But also a couple of other things. We hear every day in the literature and from entrepreneurs about failing fast. And I prefer to say failing forward. And what that means is you better learn. It doesn't pay
Right.
off to just fail all the time. I mean, you can fail every day of the week and you can do it very quickly, but you want to take the lessons. You don't want to be a prisoner of your past, but you want to
Mhm.
learn from it and use that to build going forward. And so it's not just about speed, but it's about learning and building a foundation. And as I said, when people talk about innovation, they always confuse it with invention. And innovation is a very scientific process. It's one that appeals to engineers because it's a step-by-step process. Invention, yeah, maybe an apple will fall on your head, no pun intended, and you'll get a bright new idea. But the way we move forward in medicine and in just about any discipline is by getting a little better all the time, and by doing it, by the way, for substantial periods of time as well.
So I also heard you say in your presentation that you were born to innovate. Am I
Well,
misquoting you?
well, no, I was raised by parents who gave me an ungodly and undeserved opinion of myself, and so it's made me a horrible employee and a very good entrepreneur. So I think that you are. I think, frankly, that everybody can be taught to be entrepreneurial. There are a whole bunch of skills. How do you tell a simple story? How do you create a vision that people can share? How do you do all these things? But the job of being an entrepreneur is right for some folks, and for other people, they will do very, very well in a different kind of environment. So, but
Mhm.
I know, having done this for a dozen companies over 50 years and having probably 12,000 employees today, that this is what I love, and this is what I'll continue to do because it's that important.
Okay. I wanted to talk about the other driver as well. Obviously, your drive to invest would be principally based on the financial return, but there must be other.
Actually not. Yeah, actually it's not. It's,
Okay.
I mean, we have in our fund, we have about 25 investments. And I would say that it's less about finance because we don't invest, colossal sums. It's more about giving back. It's the people who are investors in our fund are successful entrepreneurs and business people, and they want to make money available and support available. And by the way, it's both. And
Mm-hmm.
we can talk about mentors because they love the mentoring function as much as the money. So it's not really about money as a principal driver. In fact, we just had one of our companies, just a remarkable exit where, these two kids, a husband and wife, invented this device, and the company was just a part of the company was acquired just recently for about $100 million. And they were so capital efficient that they only raised under $2 million. So a huge success for Chicago. It'll be one that's talked about for a long time in the city. And they dedicated 5 hard years. But now what they want to do is have the freedom to go support and pursue other new ideas and also support other entrepreneurs.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. One of the things that I read about you was that a couple of your early graduates from Tribeca went on to become millionaires shortly after graduation.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of those. 1871, which was mentioned a couple of times. I mean, Cameo, to give you an idea, Cameo, especially during the pandemic, has become a tool for the whole world. Just like Zoom. And Cameo started right in 1871. And a couple of our other companies have been very critical in terms of helping to access PPE supplies and distribute those supplies successfully. So there's a lot going on, and Chicago has become a real hub for entrepreneurs.
Right. And it seems like you're central to that hub.
Well, that's just a function of being old. If you stay upright long enough, you can become part of a whole lot of different stories.
Well, my question is, you talk even in your book a lot about serving in the role of mentorship. So can you talk a little bit about why that's so critical to emerging innovators and entrepreneurs?
Well, I think that throughout our lives we have mentors, and I think it's definitely a two-way street. I think a good mentor gains as much and learns as much from the process as the mentee does. But I think it's important, and one of the things that's sort of tricky about entrepreneurship is I tell everybody that their first job should not be trying to invent the next Apple computer or Dell, computer. It should be to go to work for somebody who's very smart and who they can learn from. To be a role player for a while before you roll your own, and in doing that, you have an opportunity, especially these days with the extent to which portability is it's increasing dramatically. You can work for different companies, and in fact, you will work for different companies, and you can work in different parts of the country. And all of those are learning opportunities. And I honestly, and we've mentioned it a couple of times already, but you have to keep your refreshing and building your skills. And technology is a trap. When I was learning computers in 1963 and 1964 at IIT, we learned languages that nobody in the world uses anymore, except insurance companies who still have code buried somewhere in their archives. But what doesn't change is the thought process. And you learn the thought process, and you learn how to think about problems and organize your thoughts in very compelling ways. You learn those from mentors. And so I say to all of our entrepreneurs, go work for some really smart people at Microsoft or at Google or at some of these places. And frankly, going to work for an entrepreneur who's learning on the job, you never know whether he's one day or she's one day ahead of you in terms of knowing what they're talking about. So it's not the most powerful way to learn.
Okay, so one more question, then we'll turn it over to June and the wider audience. And you did talk about this in your presentation, and so I apologize for asking
Okay. Yeah.
the question again, but I just think it's worthwhile for you to just kind of go back and recap this for our Governor State students who are listening. As a leader in innovation and efficiency, can you share your thoughts on how innovation is going to change the ways we study, work, live in our everyday lives, especially post-COVID?
Well, I think that I think almost all the experts, all the people that I respect in terms of their opinions, talk about two different things. One is that the present is becoming the future a lot faster than the present is becoming the past. And what that means is we've pulled forward years of learning about video conferencing. Years.
Right.
I mean, you know, every kid today knows how to Zoom. I mean, more than we do, you know, and so that's accelerated a technology that permits us to share and to telecommute ways that are going to change education and a lot of other areas. So that's one idea that we didn't expect that everybody would become an expert overnight in terms of video conferencing. It's been years. I mean, it's 20 years ago, Microsoft announced something called Net Meeting, and it was supposed to be, there would be a little computer camera, which Intel was building into monitors, and you were going to be able to press a button and talk to people, and it never took off. And then Microsoft bought Skype, and it never took off. And then, you know, all of these other things, it took the pandemic to wake everybody up to,
Right.
frankly, the value. And believe me, I understand about Zoom fatigue, and I understand about all these other things, but in terms of commuting and the trillions of hours lost in commuting, the trillions of hours lost in going to have a meeting that you can do in half the time,
Right.
all these things. So that's becoming a critical part of the new world. The second thing that is really something that's crept up on us, and I talk about this when I talk about ease and convenience and access. In all of your own lives, think about how short a time ago it was when you thought that to get a flu shot, you needed to make a painful appointment with a doctor and go to a doctor's office and pay money and take time and do all this, and a professional would give you the flu shot. Today, anybody and their dog can go to Walgreens or CVS or whatever and get a free flu shot on your time, at your schedule, your convenience. And this is an enormous change. And that's just the beginning of the way we're going to increasingly look at medicine. And we're going to use tools, particularly tools for remote management of conditions like diabetes and things like that. And that's going to change the game, because we'll be able to tell whether you forget an insulin shot or whether you aren't being as conscientious about taking your medications or checking your various vital signs. We'll know, because you'll be working or carrying, wearing a device or a watch, an Apple Watch, for example, with blood ox. And so all of those things are going to, again, be huge shifts. And honestly, we're going to be healthier, and we're going to be offered better care. And also, it's going to be less expensive. That's an amazing change in the world. So.
Well, thank you again for all your incredible insights. The future is definitely here. And I'm going to turn it over to June so she can open it up for more questions. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Howard, for that insightful presentation, and Zion for that very rich conversation. So attendees, please, you can type questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, or if you prefer to speak, ask your questions verbally, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you, and you can speak. Any questions? Don't be shy. Howard, I do have a question about higher education institutions. Sure. How do you think the technology, the COVID, what we are going through now will upend the higher education industry? We've seen industry companies starting their own, taking education in their own hand, training, modular training, certificates, and stackable certifications, things like that. And how do you think this whole industry will be affected?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, I think that there's going to be enormous price pressure because a whole portion of the population doesn't really understand or value the overall education experience. They think that it's bite-sized, and they think that you can get it anywhere. I think we're going to see the big technology companies moving into, just as you said, certification. But the problem is it's not just certification. The three components of the educational experience are content for sure, certification for sure, but also the social experience. I mean, the shared learning and the peer activities and things like that. And that's one of the biggest risks about remote education. I don't think, when we look back, I think that we're going to discover that for certain kinds of rote learning, maybe for certain kinds of things, it worked. But by and large, for people under about 15, I think that they're going to discover that we may have had a lost year in education. So higher education is in a little better shape because we're dealing with grown-ups in theory. I say that lovingly as a college president several times over.
Right.
But in terms of K through 12, I think it's scary. It's really scary. And of course, those kids are going to graduate into the college system. And I think we're going to discover that there's going to be enormous remedial requirements. So I think that education in every respect is going to be having to change. And there's going to be a lot of pressure. And it's going to just grow post-pandemic. I think colleges are going to have a great deal of difficulty when the kids have said, why would I come and pay an enormous amount of tuition and things if I could be sitting in my room at home and having the same experience? The truth is, it's not the same experience.
Right. There's a question from Reggie Greenwood. Can you describe an example of a story that creates context to better communicate with the customer? You did say context was more important than the content.
Yeah. So let me tell you that the best answer to that is to think of the word context as channel. And so channel means how are you going to speak to me? And the components of that equation are very simple. I want you to tell me what I need to know, when I need to know it, where I am, wherever I am, without asking. And I want that to help me be smarter or more efficient or more productive. So if you're giving me information that I don't need, then I'm not going to listen at all. I'm going to discard that immediately. If you're giving me timely and important information, then that's a different situation. The example we always use is about privacy. People say, for instance, all the time, they're concerned about their medical information and they don't want their medical information shared with everyone. But then you ask them if they were in an accident and they were laying in the street, would they want the paramedical people who were there trying to decide how to take care of them and save their life, would they want them to have instant access to their medical information? And of course, they all answer yes. So there's a lot to be said for these harder discussions. They're all related to the transaction and the content and the context in which we're going on. And so we see that, a good example is we're able to let you order basketball jerseys and other swag while you're sitting, if you're ever sitting again in some auditorium. And watching your favorite player instead of waiting at the end of the game in some line with your kids trying to buy them stuff and hoping you'll ever get out of the parking lot. Now you can hold your phone up, look at a guy's jersey, press a button and buy it, and it'll probably be at your home around the same time that you get home. Now that's context, that's convenience, that's ease. And frankly, most of those folks within reason don't care what they're paying because the price is not as important as the experience and the complete solution that's being offered there.
That's great. Any questions, other questions from the audience? Okay, I see.
David Green.
David, yeah, so I was trying to figure out how to ask the question through Q&A. Howard, great talk. We have many questions from students at Governor State. Or students come to us, they want to be an entrepreneur, they want to start a business, they have an interesting product. You gave us some great principles, some great steps. What is something that a student could do that's like very actionable, like a step they could take this week, this month to help?
Well, I think that the good news is places like 1871 and Matter and M-Hub, all of these are entrepreneurial hubs, or the Hatchery. A lot of their content now is online. So, I would say that the best thing to do to get started is to learn what the basics are. Now, let me just make it clear that we think today that the barriers to entry to starting any new business are very modest. There's nowhere near the capital requirements. You didn't have to go buy a server and do all these things. You can rent just about everything from Amazon or from one of the tech companies. But the barriers to success are ever more substantial because clutter and noise and cost of reaching the right audience and things like that. So, what I tell young entrepreneurs who think they have a good idea is there are a number of forms, there are a number of ways that they can expose their idea to people who are knowledgeable in certain industries, whatever industry they happen to be dealing with. There are a lot of people who are willing to provide mentoring in that context. And that's the most important thing, I think, is to do the homework that is required by going and getting smarter, getting really smarter. A lot of, I've had businesses, in the food space, every week somebody calls me up and says, I have a new idea about delivering food or whatever. And frankly, we had a couple of students at IIT who invented a company called Chow Bus, and they focused exclusively on Asian foods and found a niche market. And honestly, you could do Grubhub, you could do DoorDash, all these things, but they discovered that they could compete very successfully because they drew a very small market. They knew their customers very well. They built immediate loyalty and connection, and that company is going to be quite successful. Now, what does quite successful mean? It means that in a year or two, they better sell to one of the bigger companies because that's the way the rest of the world works, which is it's very much a market that's dominated in just about every single field by a few of these tech giants right now.
Many of my friends ordered from Chow Bus during the pandemic. That's my first time I heard. It was funded by 2 students.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Actually, that was the same question that came in the Q&A from a student, so I'm going to skip that one. And then there's another question. How would you suggest upcoming and recent graduates prepare themselves for the job market in this environment in light of the fact that several internships are virtual and students are unable to gain the traditional internship experience?
Well, I think that they should prepare themselves by doing the best that they can within that context. I think that companies still need interns. They still want to figure out how to build a pipeline. So I think that what students should do mostly is focus on how can they find the right kind of place where they want to work and where they're going to learn something. I mean, I think that with the education that the students and the recent graduates have, they shouldn't sell themselves short. They should probably be patient enough to find the right kind of place. And they should also be willing to, once they're there, they should understand that there are no shortcuts. And a lot of these businesses want to really grow their own. You know, they want you to learn the culture. And this is the scary thing about these remote working environments. I honestly don't know how successfully the culture of a company can be communicated if everybody is distributed all over the place. So we're going to see, I think the next step, the next stage will be companies on a fairly infrequent but regulated basis are going to try to bring groups of their people together because they just cannot express and share the culture when it's 40 different people sitting in front of their computers, wherever they may be.
Yes. Yeah, actually, companies are hiring internship or full-time, and we just had our virtual career fair this afternoon, and we had 10 companies coming, meeting with our students in one-on-one virtual sessions.
Yeah.
Dr. Josie has his hand raised. Please, Dr. Josie, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question for Howard. We started a supply chain incubator on campus. So I'm just curious to know, from your perspective, right, what kind of disruptions do you see in supply chains right now and logistics, and what do you see going forwards?
The biggest disruption is that we're going from a just-in-time philosophy of supply chains to a just-in-case. And the reason we're doing that is because we got killed by having all of the PPE requirements be in China. And so the biggest single change in terms of supply chain will be more about resilience, more about diversification, more about proximity, and all of that will be localized. So you're going to see a tremendous growth of warehousing and storage capabilities around the central city core to a very significant extent. This is what Amazon is doing. If you look at Amazon, Amazon has opened 11 or 12 enormous warehouses surrounding just Chicago, and they're probably doing that in every major city in the country to be able to fulfill supply chain requirements. But companies are going to invest a little more money so they're never caught quite as empty-handed as they were with respect to the supplies for the pandemic. Now, the second part of that is going to be replenishment. And again, replenishment is going to be driven in exactly the fashion I described for you before about prediction. Replenishment will be driven by anticipating the requirements before you run out of supplies. So the closet will never be empty. The hospital will never run out of supplies because we'll know what the demand is, we'll know what the expectations are, we'll anticipate and pre-ship a lot of those things. So the supply chain is going to change very much. Now, the last thing, and then I'll shut up, is 3D printing. 3D printing, we're finally getting over the hurdle, which was you could either have something small and fast or something big that would just take an ungodly amount of time. And excuse me, we're getting to the point where 3D printing is going to be available at a reasonable cost and within a reasonable time frame.
So we may have time for one more question as Howard gets some drink.
Sure.
To conclude this part, what is the most important soft skills do you think students need to be in order to be successful nowadays?
Well, I think that most schools in this country, especially graduate business schools, don't teach sales. They don't teach people to sell themselves. And I think that people come with great technical skills and business skills, and they don't know how to tell a simple story, but the story they need to tell is their own story. They need to be able to pitch and present themselves and by and large, interviewing skills and selling skills are the most critical soft skill.
Mhm. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good luck.
Thank
Good
you
luck to
again.
everybody, and thank you for the opportunity. And I look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Thank you so much.